so we had a little bit of time here for us to go over this. Let's call on some people to do this. So for this one, Jade, who is our population? Yep, that's going to be Americans. Just referring to everybody that we want to know this about. So I'm going to underline Americans. The population is Americans. All right, now, Isaac, who is in the sample?
Students.
The 100 students I talked to, right? So that group, that represents our sample. Now, what about the parameter, guys? Parameter, where do we even get that from?
Seen eventers.
So that was out of our population who has seen it. So remember, population and parameters go together. So how many of the whole population saw Endgame? 75%, that's referring to that. But then according to my statistic, let me underline this so I got it. How many people had seen it?
65.
So remember, statistics come from samples and parameters come from populations. Okay, good job. Who would represent an individual?
Student.
Well, it would come from the population. One person in the population. So
One
just be an American, right? Just one person. And then Brian, what is our variable here? What are we interested in finding out about these people? Okay, there we go. Is this ringing bells from last time? No? Oh yeah, I thought you said no. I'm like, uh-oh. So guys, we're going to build off of this today. We're going to talk about sampling methods and observational studies and experiments. Why different methods are important and why it's important for us to know the difference between experiment and observation. So first off, what's the difference between a census and a sample? Who can tell me what a census is? We had one in 2020. It kind of got cut short because of the pandemic. But what happens in a census, Jade? What do we do? Yeah. It's where they go through and they talk to everybody in the population, right? Their goal is to talk to every stinking person. How hard is that to do?
Very hard.
It costs a lot of money, it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. Why do we do it? Do you know why we do a census?
Because we're all obsessed with statistics.
No. It has to do with your representation. How do you determine how many delegates you get in the House of Representatives? The population, right? So if we don't have a good way of determining population, well then we could be like, hey, we should have more delegates, our population is higher, so they count everyone and say, hey, this is your population. Now, the census, so let's write this in here. So a census is when you, let's talk about this in terms of statistics. This is when you ask everyone in your population. The challenge with this, which is why we don't always do a census, is the amount of time, money, and effort is just crazy. They have to hire thousands of people who go door to door and talk to people and gather information from them. And some of them aren't always the nicest, right? Some of them ignore them. So they have to go and follow up and check with them and say, hey, we need to talk to you. I think you might even get fined if you don't give the proper information. So it's like, let me talk to you, and people aren't always the nicest. Okay? So what do we do instead? We do a sample. What does sample mean? We talked about that last time. Yeah, this is a certain amount of people from the population, a subgroup of the population. Now what's interesting is several other countries no longer do a census. They said this takes way too much time, way too much money. let's do a well-designed sample. And they're able to kind of get an idea of how many people are in their country and their different like ethnicities and their different ages from a sample, and then they apply it to the big picture. And that's kind of the goal with statistics and inference is what we call it, is we have a big population. And we want to know something about that population, but it takes too long to ask everyone. So we take a sample, gather the data from the sample, and our goal is to hope to apply it back. We call this process inference. We're inferring or making assumptions about the population based off of our sample. But here's the question, and this is going to lead into today. Does it matter how we get our sample?
Yes.
Yes, it does. Why do you think, Mindy, why do you think that matters?
Because like if you were taking a statistic on like something that only applied to certain people, like I can't think of one right now.
I'll come up with it in a second. But
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah, but like if you come up with something specific, it like only applies to certain group of people, but your sample is not them. Like you just take a random sample or sample specifically not them, then you're gonna get like biased results.
Yeah, that's it. Let me jump ahead, guys. I'm gonna actually skip. Let's do this one. So first off, samples. When we go to the Costco lady and she gives us a sample, the point of that is to give us a taste of it, right? She says, hey, try this piece of chicken or try this orange juice, and it should be so good we want more. Okay? So, I kind of put the wrong thing in the wrong place, sorry. So what is a sample? It's a portion or a small part of the population. And the goal is to give us a taste. Okay? Now, my goal when we're taking a sample is we want the sample to reflect the population. I'm going to come back to this in a second, okay? I want to share a couple of statistics that I gathered, okay? I am a coach, as you know, and there's a lot of sports at Hunter. Sometimes those coaches and their athletes get a little competitive with whose program is best. So I was like, fine, I want to use my statistical skills and settle this. So I took a sample of 36 Hunter students, and I asked them questions about sports at Hunter and said, which sport is the best sport at Hunter? You know what the results came to? 100% said soccer
Oh, wow.
is the best sport at Hunter. 100%. We didn't even bring up any other sports. Pretty amazing, right?
You're like, how many people on your soccer team?
That was about 36.
Oh wow.
So who did I ask? Okay, does that matter? I mean, they're Hunter students, right?
It's biased towards the others.
Yeah, I like the word bias. We're going to talk about that more.
So
Bias means we're favoring people, and in this case, who are we favoring? Soccer people. Did that sample that I just took, did it represent our whole population? Like if we were to look at, let's just say sports in general, okay? What sports do people play at Hunter?
Football,
So we've got football would be here,
Golf.
soccer, golf, basketball,
Volleyball.
tennis, volleyball,
Wrestling.
wrestling,
Do we have baseball?
track. Okay, let's just say it looks like that. If I were to, let's say this is all the sports at Hunter. If I were to take a sample, what would I want to see in this sample? I would want to see all the sports represented as well, right?
So you wouldn't want to ask like the football team or the baseball team or whatever, because they're going to be favoring.
Exactly. Now it's okay that they have their opinion, but the point is if there are, let's say there's like 800 athletes and I do a sample of 80, I want to make sure that my sports are represented there. When I did the sample of just soccer players, that didn't represent the whole population very well, right? So that's our goal here, is we want our sample to reflect the
So
population.
yeah, you either sample equal amounts of each of those, or you sample people that aren't actually on the team.
We're going to go to this, and we're going to talk about that more than methods. I'm going to jump ahead. The point is we want to be careful that we're not biased, and that's actually, Eleanor used that word already. Do you guys know what the word biased means? What do you think it means, Melissa? so that's kind of the word that I hear a lot is it's favoritism. No, I am not spelling that right. Favoritism. That looks better. That is when we are over-representing or under-representing certain people. So for example, when I said, what sport is the best sport at Hunter, who was I over-representing?
Soccer.
And who was I under-representing?
Everybody else.
Everybody else, right? So, different example, I decided to survey students at Hunter and say, who is the best teacher at Hunter? And they all came back and said it was me. Oh, shucks. Now, does the point that I surveyed people with bad grades and offered them extra credit, does that make any difference here?
Yes.
But also
Obviously,
just
that's-
you asking makes a difference.
That's true, right?
Because then it's like,
Because then you
No.
feel that pressure that you have to, well, I have to say it's him,
Yeah.
right?
like, well, it's Solar's asking, don't it?
Well, it's you, of course.
Of course.
I wanna see that though, so all of us go outside, all the teachers stand in different places, and then go to your favorite
And
teacher.
go to your favorite teacher, and then there's going to be some lonely teachers.
It will be, there are gonna be so many lonely teachers, not just
No, but
me.
he's gonna go to the math teacher.
All right.
He might be the only math teacher that will go to Mr. Solberg.
So let's talk about the different ways that we can get a sample, because obviously that makes a difference. There are good ways and there are bad ways, and I'm going to give you some definitions and some examples here, okay? So a convenience sample, what does the word convenience mean?
Easy.
Good. And this is when we only ask people who are easy to access. For example, I can ask you guys questions and get quick data, right? And I'd be like, all right, you've got these options for graduation, which one do you like best? But that would be a convenience sample because convenience samples are very biased. So we don't like this one. I'm going to put a side note here that they are biased. Meaning that they overrepresent or underrepresent certain groups. Look around you. In this class, who are we overrepresenting for the school?
I don't know.
What'd you say?
Juniors.
Juniors, right? Is everyone here a junior? Is that fair
There's
to
no-
the
there's no
seniors or
kidding
the sophomores or
sophomores.
freshmen? So, a convenience sample gives you quick data, but it's biased. Now, let's say I gave you a homework assignment. I said, I want you to go ask your friends about this thing. Or, sorry, take that back. I said, I want you to talk to 20 people about this subject or something. Who would you probably go to? Your family and friends, because they're easy to ask. But the problem is, usually your family and your friends have the same opinion you do, right? Usually you have something in common, not always, but then your data is just going to look very biased because it's just showing you and your friends and your opinions, but not the whole big picture. Okay, cool. Let's go to the next one. We're going to talk about self-selected. Another name for this is voluntary response.
Is this the court? The jury? What is
No.
your opinion on this? Oh, sorry,
This
we're
is
not
when
gonna
you-
let you in.
This is when you volunteer.
Okay.
So this is when you actually choose to participate in a survey or providing information, okay? Now, as I have seen so often throughout this year, most of you have a smartphone, right? Try and sneak it out and look at it when you're supposed to be doing math. Now, on a smartphone, you all have downloaded apps, and usually within like the first time using the app, what does it ask you to do?
Log in.
Good, but after you've used it for a little bit.
Sign your terms and conditions. It wants you to
It
review
asks
it.
you to rate the app, okay? It says, hey, we see that you like this, why don't you give us a review? Now, let me ask you this, how many of you have ever taken the time to rate an app?
Never.
Raise a hand.
I'm actually
Just a couple? Why are so many of you not raising your hands? You've been asked several times, why don't you?
'Cause
don't care.
So, I don't want to take the time to rate
it
an
wasn't
app.
monumental.
Melissa, you said you took the time. Why did you take the time?
Was it
I
bad?
guess I can. Isaac, what about you?
good app for like.
Yeah, so if you like the app, you're like, yeah, I'll give it a good
I
review,
only
okay?
leave reviews when I don't like it.
Okay, so there's the other side of it. We only do reviews if we don't like it,
Let
okay?
other people know.
Now, have you ever, if you're gonna go buy something, like for me, I'm on Amazon and I'm looking at this product, you go to the reviews, and the reviews, they're usually very there's a lot of 1 star saying this product ruined my life, it killed my dog,
Yeah.
and I hate it forever, right? Then on the other side, they're like, this was the best thing in the world, I love it, right?
Yeah.
Not a whole lot of middle ground, right? Because who chooses to take the time to review stuff?
People
People
who love
who
it and
either
people who
like
hate
it or
it.
hate it.
There we go. So that's the problem when we let people volunteer, is it's not reflective of the population. Usually we only get those with strong opinions, okay? So, for example, okay, let's say, Jade, you're on LIA. I'm going to use you as an example. Let's say she wanted to get an idea of how people felt about current immigration laws, okay? So she goes and sets up a table in the commons area at lunch and says, has a big poster that says, tell me your opinion about immigration. Who's going to take the time to go talk to Jade?
People who have a big opinion
People
about
who have an opinion about it, right? Now, are people without an opinion going to go talk to you?
No.
Probably not. They're like, I'm just going to eat my lunch. So then, based on the people you talk to, does that show who's actually interested? Or, sorry, does that show everyone's general opinion? No, it just shows those with strong feelings. So, we don't really like self-selected samples, because when people choose to participate, it doesn't represent the whole community, okay? Does that make sense? And let me give one more example. So there was this town, and the leaders in this city, they were concerned that all of their residents were out of shape. And they're like, you know what, guys? We need to get a fitness center, a city fitness center, so people can come and exercise and get in better shape. But when they brought that idea to the city board, they're like, it's going to cost us millions of dollars to build a fitness center. We want to see evidence that people are actually out of shape. So they said, all right, why don't we do this? Let's do a sample from our community where people will come and do a fitness test, and we'll see if they pass a fitness test. Well, the way they decided to administer this was they said, let's just let people sign up. So they went, they posted this somewhere, and they said, hey, anyone who wants to sign up for a fitness test, we'll give you a free fitness test. Now here's the question, who is going to volunteer to do a fitness test?
the people who will have fitness.
People who are in shape. So then, those people show up, they pass a fitness test, and now the city board gets the results, and it's showing your town has a ton of people in shape. So are they going to get a fitness center built for them? No. Does that necessarily mean that their town is healthy? No, it just means only people who showed up for the sample, they chose to because they were in shape.
What about when you tell them that, like, if you told them?
Well, I guess it depends how it's communicated, but even if you went to someone who's out of shape and said, hey, we're trying to do this thing, would they still want to participate?
I know, but is that a different kind of statistic? Is if you tell them?
So that's a good point, and that gets a little more in depth than what we're going to, is like when you're doing an experiment or a survey, a well-designed survey, you should inform them of it, right? But sometimes they don't, and that's also in experiments, sometimes they don't want you to know what you're actually experimenting them on, because then that influences how you act.
Well, yeah, because if they knew that if they lost the fitness test, they'd get the fitness center. then they
Exactly,
might
so then they would
purposely
like
lose.
throw the results, right? So
Yeah.
they probably aren't going to tell them all the data, but they're just like, oh, we just want to see how our customer or how our people are, right? So there's a certain amount of like, you don't tell them everything, but you want to tell them enough. All right, let me give you the other four. So these are our bad ones. We don't like these ones because they don't give us proper data. They give us bad data. Now, let me tell you what these other ones are. Systematic. This is where you ask every nth person. If you're like, what do you mean by nth person? Well, it depends on how many people you're asking and how big the population. But let's say I was going to go to a football game and I was going to ask people a question as they're leaving the game. I'm going to ask every, let's say, 10th person or every 20th person. But the point is, I'm not choosing who I talk to, because if I choose who I talk to, then I'm probably going to ask people that I'm friends with, or people that I think will give a positive response, right? If I see someone walking out and he's this huge muscular dude and he looks scary, I might avoid talking to that person and be like, I don't want him to be mean to me or something, right? So that's systematic, is you just ask every nth person. Now, the one that's most important here is called a random sample. Random is a weird word because in English, it means something different than statistics. I just did a Google search of random pictures. And this is what came up. And they're just really random, right? They're kind of bizarre, a little out of place. Like, okay. But in statistics, do you know what random means?
You can't predict it.
Yeah, in random, it means that, so for a simple random sample, it means that people have an equally likely chance of being chosen. So, I haven't used these in a while, but do you guys remember these sticks of destiny for your class?
Yes.
Whoa. I've been using these since I started teaching. And I know that sometimes people are like, oh, we did those in elementary. Why is it advantageous for a teacher to do this? And then if I have a question, for me to just say, what do you think, Maddie, who's no longer in the class anymore, right? Maddie, what was her name? Anyway, what were you going to say, Eleanor? Why is this advantageous for a teacher?
Because when you're in like getting in a new class or a new grade, a lot of kids are shy and they won't talk, so it's really hard for teachers to get people to volunteer.
So sometimes, like, if the student knows I didn't just call on them because, like, I'm picking on them or they have their phone out, then it kind of gets, hey, I was just chosen by chance. But the idea is everyone's name is on a stick in here.
I don't know, one time
So-
you took out my stick and put it down.
Everyone, well, after I ask you a question, I say, all right, so Adrian, tell me what you think. Then I'm not going to call on Adrian anymore, right? But then I can go through the whole class until I've called on everyone, right? So everyone has an equally likely chance of being chosen. Am I favoring anybody?
No.
Am I over-representing or under-representing? No. So random, that's kind of how we do that, is we basically put everyone's name on a list, and we randomly choose from that list. Or we put everyone's name on a piece of paper, a popsicle stick, and then we choose one. And we like it because it's fair. Everyone has an equally likely chance of being chosen. But sometimes the results, even when we do it randomly, they don't always come out the greatest, okay? Let's say that, like, Hunter was given 10 tickets to a Utah Jazz game. And they said, all right, we're going to randomly choose 10 students at Hunter to get those, okay? So let's say they came to me as a stats teacher and said, help us randomly choose 10 people. So I chose 10 people and it came back like this. Seniors, juniors, sophomores, freshmen. I randomly chose 10 people and it chose 3 seniors, 4 juniors, 2 sophomores, and 1 freshman. Even if it was random, could this happen like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, because with random, it's just, I'm pulling out names. And it's going to give me, like, sometimes people think I've got to have the same amount for all of those. And with random, anything could happen. I could even have it where I have 5 juniors and 0 freshmen. But how are those freshmen going to feel about it?
Underrepresented.
They're going to be like, this isn't fair. And I'll say, shut up, freshman. No one cares about it.
Or
Just
you
kidding.
could have,
We're
or
nice,
you
but
could have all pulled seniors, or all pulled
Yeah.
juniors, or all pulled sophomores, or all pulled freshmen.
So sometimes what we're going to do is we're going to modify how we do our sampling to make it so it's still random, but still make it a little better. Okay, one of those, I'm going to jump cluster and go to stratified. In a stratified sample, what we do is we split the population into groups. And then choose